here in Australia. Actually, what I might do is hand it over to you, Ben, now to share your presentation, and then I will come back, take the reins, introduce Rach, who will give some context to what you are saying in New Zealand space, and then we'll open up for questions after that.
That sounds great. Anna, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and super excited to share the floor today with Rachel, as well as we work through the presentation. So thanks for everyone joining today. I'll kick things off my end with a quick acknowledgement of country, just wanting to acknowledge here that I'm actually coming from Australia here, so currently sitting on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are joining us on the call today. As Anna mentioned, this was a workshop that Rita from Accenture and myself delivered at WeConnect last year. That was well received, and today, unfortunately, I'm flying solo, so I don't have my best buddy to back me up here. So I think the presentation is pretty much bang on what we delivered last year, and it's designed to be interactive, and it's kind of starting with the basics. While I'm presenting, if anyone's got any questions or comments or thoughts, please just come off the mic and interrupt me. When I'm presenting, I'm not going to see your hand go up or anything, so just jump in, or Anna, maybe you can mention that as well. You can monitor any hands up. You can jump in and ask any questions. So let me just start by sharing my screen, and if all goes well, then technology will be my friend today. Hopefully you can all see this now. There has been a slight update. I'm no longer the supply diversity lead at JLL. I'm now called the social lead. Minor little changes within our team, but my roles and responsibilities don't change. So as Anna mentioned, I used to work at Supply Nation for about 5 years, supporting government and buying corporations with their supply diversity program. Now transitioned over to the dark side and working with a large corporate. You may have heard of Jones Lang LaSalle. They're a corporate real estate company, and I'm supporting JLL achieve, I guess, our supply diversity ambitions and those of our clients within the APAC region. So I've been here about 3 years now. This particular presentation, look, it's designed to be generic. It's not necessarily the thoughts and opinions of JLL, although I'll try and pepper in any any learnings that we've made along the way and any programs that we're implementing here within APAC or globally to assist us with our supply diversity efforts and ambitions. So let's get started. So today's agenda, on my side, we're going to go through a bit of a conversation around, what is Tier 2? What does that all mean? And why is it that organisations look to build successful Tier 2 programs? And what are the benefits for those suppliers that become Tier 2 suppliers as well? And we're going to delve into that. And then some of the elements to consider, perhaps when you're developing your own Tier 2 program. And there'll be time for some questions and comments right at the end of the presentation after Rachel's delivered her piece. But first, I'm going to kickstart with a bit of a survey. So if you hopefully people have had experience with this, you can access this on your phone by scanning the QR code, or you can go to the website, joining@menti.com, and you just enter in that number there, and that will provide you access through to the survey. I'm going to present my screen here. So we can see people are already in, which is super awesome.
Ben, could you please just go back to the scan, to the QR code for 1 sec?
Also can. There it is. Sorry, I probably moved a bit too quickly there.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you.
I'll give everyone a little bit of time.
That's council.
All good? All good? Sweet. All right, let's jump in. Just wanted to get a bit of an understanding of who we've got in the room, and then also, where you are. Has your organisation got a tier 2 program established? Is it something you're thinking about? And it looks like we've got a little bit of a mix in the room. Some of those responses coming in now. Great to see that we've got a number of organisations here that have already got a tier 2 program in place. And sometimes organisations have tier 2 programs that are purely for reporting only. And it's not necessarily something that they're driving as a fully robust program. There we go. Okay, well, I think we've probably got most of the responses there by the look of it. I'll move on to the next slide. So if your organisation has a tier 2 program, what procurement categories do you tend to include? So this could be construction, or is it facilities maintenance or office supplies? What's your primary focus for your tier 2 program? Just have to put a little word in there. Hopefully that's working. There we go. Okay, labour hire, construction, corporate hospitality. Yep. All very common categories that organisations tend to focus on when they're developing their tier 2 program. A lot of opportunity there to engage with some of the smaller and diverse suppliers. Excellent. All right, going to move on to, where are we going now? Just get my slide back. There we go. Office operations, cultural work, catering and gifts. Yep, brilliant. So a real, actually, quite a good all-rounded representation of different categories. If you have a tier 2 program, how long has it been running so far? So less than 1 year, between 1 and 5, more than 5, or perhaps we don't have a tier 2 program. Or have we got any of them that have been running for more than 5 years? There's some relatively new organisations that have newly established tier 2, which is great to see. Okay, moving on. And if you have a tier 2 program, does it form part of your internal and/or external reporting? So is it a program that you're just sort of running in-house, or is it something that you're reporting on internally and tracking, or are you reporting on that externally? Different organisations have different objectives of their tier 2 program at this stage, and sometimes when they get up and running, they start confidently reporting those numbers, including them in their supplier diversity numbers. Okay, so a bit of a mix there. I think we're on to the final question. If you have a tier 2 program, what is your biggest challenge? I've just put some suggestions in there. These tend to be common challenges when building a tier 2 program. And it's not easy to build these programs. There are quite often challenges as there are in this space. So interesting to see what our feedback is here. Okay, so looks like market maturity issues, looking for diverse suppliers to include within your tier 2 programs. Data reporting is always a massive issue. I don't think that problem will ever go away. Getting the buy-in from your prime suppliers to support your tier 2 efforts. Yep, that's a really big one as well. Brilliant. Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you for your responses to that. I think they're all very common, very typical responses we tend to see. And I thought that was just interesting to get a bit of a test as to who we've got in the room and where we are with our programs. So, I probably should have started with a definition of what tier 2 is before we launch into the program, but I kind of made a bit of an assumption that, you knew what you're getting yourself into. But essentially a tier 2, or sometimes it's called a second tier program, is the vehicle used by tier 1 suppliers to extend inclusion in their supply chain to smaller and or diverse suppliers. So takes the focus away from just on your tier 1 suppliers and tracking diverse spend with them, but it's a way of extending that influence down the supply chain, of utilising your tier 1 suppliers to drive greater impact and have them contract with diverse suppliers. So the results can be really powerful when you get the buy-in from your tier 1 suppliers and you get them to sort of start considering diverse suppliers in their procurement processes. And you may have seen this quick explanation of what tier 2 looks like in a nutshell. This was actually borrowed from the Supply Nation tier 2 procurement paper, which I'm fairly certain is actually available for the general public to download from their website. It's one of the documents that pretty sure they make publicly available. In a nutshell, we're all buyers. Well, I'm assuming we're all buyers in the room here. Sitting at the top there, we're buying goods and services, and to fulfill those needs, we're contracting with our tier 1 suppliers or our first tier suppliers. And then what we're doing is we're leveraging those suppliers to subcontract or contract with diverse suppliers. And that can be either directly, and we say if it's direct, the goods and services that are delivered through that subcontract are directly tied to the contract between the tier 1 and the buyer, so that within the scope of the contract, or indirect, they're goods and services that the first tier supplier is buying, but it can't be tied to the delivery of the contract or the contract deliverables between the first tier and the buyer there. So I guess there's some little nuances in terms of terminology that's generally used when we're talking about the tier 2 flow. So why do buying organisations build tier 2 programs? And I've put up a few suggestions here, which tend to be fairly common. But keen as well to hear from anyone else in the room as to what they think might be another reason that I may have missed. So classically, having a tier 2 program obviously demonstrates your commitment or your organisation's commitment to supplier diversity. And while many organisations start up with a tier 1 program, and they want to get that up and running and get their confidence in how to build out that program, generally they tend to start exploring how to go down further through the supply chain. They start to look at how to build out a tier 2 program to achieve their objectives. So, I guess having a mature tier 1 program and building out a tier 2 one really demonstrates an organisation's commitment to supply diversity, and really understanding how they can push greater impact down their supply chain. Obviously tied to that is it helps an organisation's brand image. And obviously we're all very interested in that as corporations, to be positioned in the marketplace as a good corporate citizen, doing what is right for the planet and for the community. And obviously having a supply diversity program really enforces that element. And very similarly, that's very much tied to ESG goals, so environmental, social and governance goals. Many organisations have these established, and quite often sitting there are goals around social community and the impact that we want to make within the community. I know at JLL, supplier diversity is a key pillar of our ESG strategy. And so building out supplier diversity, not only on a tier 1 level, but pushing it down through the tier 2 helps us to increase and grow our spend, and then it also helps us with those global targets that we have to achieve those targets that we've set. And the targets that we've set, actually, they're public in many ways as well. Now, another key area is around outsourcing. So a lot of corporations, are outsourcing key procurement categories. So it allows them to focus on their area of speciality. So an example of this may be, and I'll use my industry I'm in, is corporate real estate. So our clients that we manage, they're not experts in corporate real estate. They prefer to focus on their key focus area of, technology, for example. So they're outsourcing corporate real estate functions to larger organisations that have the capability to manage those services. And it's a huge chunk of spend that is being outsourced. And quite commonly, it's being outsourced to large, multinational organisations. And commonly, these aren't your small and diverse suppliers. So, what you're seeing is large chunk of spend being outsourced to non-diverse suppliers. So then they're looking at, okay, well, how do I get those tier 1 suppliers that are managing that large chunk of spend to engage with more small and diverse suppliers? So I guess they can then drive social impact through those large contracts. And another aspect is around legal and compliance. Many of you would be coming from larger organisations, and you'd be familiar with, I guess some of the complexities that it, how difficult it is sometimes to engage with large organisations. We put a lot of requirements in terms of insurances, contractual burdens, which make it really difficult sometimes to engage. And sometimes by engaging with a diverse supplier at the tier 2 level, some of those requirements can be reduced a little bit and the risk is a little bit less. And sometimes that can be a real benefit for small and diverse suppliers to be engaging with our tier 1 suppliers rather than directly. A lot of organisations are consolidating suppliers as well. So there's smaller opportunities less opportunities for small and diverse suppliers to participate. And again, that's very much synced also to that outsourcing issue. So it's like, okay, well, if we're consolidating suppliers, well, how within that consolidated contract, we can build opportunity for diverse suppliers in, so that's not being overlooked. Really importantly, there's that issue of sustainable growth. We all want to build up the capability, the capacity of diverse suppliers. Sometimes large corporations aren't the best places to do that because of our requirements. And sometimes when a supplier is engaging with one of our tier 1 suppliers, it's at the contract's at a more appropriate size and scale for that small and diverse supplier. But through that engagement, they can grow their capability in a scalable and sustainable way, so that hopefully at some time in the future, that tier 2 supplier is big enough and they've got the capacity to engage directly with a larger supplier. So, I guess being a tier 1 supplier is not always the best thing for a small and diverse supplier. There's nothing wrong with being a tier 2 supplier because it's appropriate to the size and capability of the business at that time, but it creates an environment where the supplier can grow. I've touched on socioeconomic impact. Of course, where we're pushing diversity down the supply chain. That's creating a ripple effect with maximising impact, and it's engaging small and diverse suppliers within the communities we operate, and it's having that desired impact. And of course, it's not to be overlooked that having a diverse supply chain brings, innovation on competition and flexibility within the supply chain. So a lot of the diverse suppliers that are within JLL's supply chain, even at the tier 2 level, they are bringing innovation to JLL and to our clients, which is really important to us. It's part of our value proposition. Does anyone have any other comments they'd like to make or suggestions around some of the benefits of a tier 2 that I may have overlooked?
Then some of our tier 2, we as a professional services firm run into issues with independence because of accounting regulations. But one of the other reasons that we put some of our smaller Indigenous businesses through, or women-owned businesses, is because of materiality issues that we run into really quickly with some of our businesses. For example, we've got a new one at the moment where they've kind of folded down their existing business, re-established, but it means straight away we run into materiality issues because they're a newly formed business. So we use one of our external labour hire payrolling companies that do that for us. And it just means that we can work with the smaller businesses without running into any issues.
Thanks, Amy. Anyone else?
Amy, would you be able to just, kia ora, expand on what materiality means?
Yeah, so when we have some of our large contracts come through, we need to look at what our spend is going to be with the subcontractor, especially for some of these government client projects that we work on. And then we look at how much percentage of their annual revenue the small business it will make up. So if it's over, we generally find here, if it's over some of these large projects, it might be over a certain amount of time, but if it's more than 40% of what their annual revenue is, we run into issues with that. But if we can outsource the payrolling of that to one of our larger suppliers, it just means that we can still meet all of our obligations, but we can use these smaller businesses to deliver on these large projects. Thank you.
Some thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, let's move on then. So moving on to the next section, it was more to cover off what are the actual benefits for a diverse supplier coming in as a tier 2. So let's explore what some of these may be. I think the first one is around access to opportunities. There's a bit of a myth sometimes you hear as tier 2 is the sort of second best, and that small and diverse suppliers should always be striving to be a tier 1 supplier. But as I mentioned before, it's not always the best and it's not always right. It may be good for you in the future, but it's not necessarily the best place for you now. And I think a great thing about being a tier 2 supplier is that it provides access to so many opportunities. So if you're a diverse supplier, a small diverse supplier engaging with a tier 1, immediately just having that relationship with that supplier provides a tier 2 supplier with access to so many other opportunities, because the tier 1 will be engaging with so many other primes. And if they're demonstrating good value and service delivery, whatever it may be, that tier 1 supplier can start building you in to the contracts that they manage with many other prime buying organisations. So that's a really good place to be, because it means as a small business, you're not having to work so hard to be knocking on so many doors to getting into that prime supplier, because your tier 1's going to be doing a lot of that work for you. So I think that's a really good point to consider. Also, through that tier 2 relationship, you can quite quickly, or a diverse supplier can quite quickly start building up a really good resume, and through associations with really great brands on their work experience. So that's another really good point. So every organisation wants to do is build up their resume of previous experience or clients that they've worked with. And so being a tier 2, like I mentioned, you can have access to so many opportunities and so many brands without the struggle of having to knock on doors and comply with the requirements of some of these larger organisations. And as I mentioned before around sustainable growth, it provides being a tier 2 supplier provides a really good environment for a lot of our small and diverse suppliers. And if I talk about JLL's experience, I work with and I meet a lot of small and diverse suppliers. It's obviously part of my role, but it's equally part of my role to assess whether or not that is going to be a sort of a viable relationship. And is that small and diverse supplier at the right level to be working directly with our key requirements? And there's a real push with a lot of organisations to consolidate suppliers or to work with large national organisations, and price downs and all that goes with it. And that's just, if I'm looking at it for JLO, it's the ease of managing relationships. When we're working with so many different suppliers, that's a lot, and that's a big cost of our business. And we tend to, there is a push, to work with those larger suppliers. But we can still include those suppliers in the supply chain, but they become a subcontractor of our tier 1 suppliers. And that can be a really good place for some of these suppliers to establish relationships, to build up their compliance, their capability, to sort of scale effectively as well in a really manageable, a really sustainable way. And then when they're ready, they can grow. And, we've seen this time and time again where some of those tier 2 suppliers have grown to such a scale that they are then able to enter as a tier 1 supplier for our organisation. So I don't think that should be overlooked. And I think I've touched on this before in terms of the experience. It really develops that supplier's experience. And I've touched on legal and compliance as well. Contracting with a large corporation is not always easy. We do set up a lot of hurdles, intentionally, unintentionally, but there's a lot of compliance requirements. And this can be a really tough gig for smaller and diverse suppliers. And sometimes that burden is lowered the further it goes down the supply chain. So that's a good consideration to make. And I guess the last point I wanted to make here is that being a diverse supplier is a real selling point. It's a unique selling point that not every supplier has. So being a diverse supplier on a tier 2 level is a really strong selling point because, when we have a diverse supplier at a tier 2 level, we are actually you are seen, you are accounted for, we can see you and we are reporting on that, and that is really helping us to achieve our corporate objectives, our global targets as well. So it's a really important thing, and we want this to be included in the supply chain. So I think that's a really standout message amongst a lot of organisations. Of course, we want quality of service at the right price. But being diverse as well aligns with our corporate objectives. So that's something that you should emphasise. And now finally, just wanted to touch on some of the key elements of what we should be considering when we're building out a supply diversity program. So I think fundamentally, we should start with a strong business case as to why we should be doing this. So it's aligning with our corporate sustainability objectives. Are we trying to meet our clients' requirements? What is it that we're doing this? And let's be really strong and specific on that. And this is a really fundamental step where you're going to get that senior management buy-in. If we don't have that within our organisation, then it's going to make it really difficult to start achieving the objectives that we're trying to set out. And so part of that, we should be really clear on what are the goals that we're trying to achieve, and then also really consider what sort of policies within our organisation we're going to have to start looking at and perhaps adapting to be inclusive of this tier 2 program. So it could be your vendor code of conduct or your procurement policy, your supply diversity policy, all those policies that are going to strengthen and reinforce the objectives of your tier 2 program. Once we've achieved that, we go on a mission of awareness and education. So I guess this is very much around identifying your key stakeholders that are going to make this program sing. So they can be both your internal and your external stakeholders, internally, senior leadership teams, procurement teams, sustainability teams, legal, finance, all of the elements within your business that are going to work to support this program. They need to be aware of what this program is, what it's supporting, so they're on board, and they're going to make those decisions that are going to help to drive this program forward. And externally, we can start talking to our clients about it, what we're trying to achieve. Also, we're going to be talking to our supply chain as well, and that's going to be the really fundamental piece, is talking with your key tier 1 suppliers around what you're trying to achieve and what are the expectations you have of your tier 1s.
Ben, I know that this is a very important slide, and it gets down to the crux of what a tier 2 program is, but we've got a couple more minutes left, so I'm just giving you a little bell.
Yeah, thank you. I'll run through. We're going to launch into the program startup. So we're going to select those suppliers that we're going to be of a key focus of our program. We're going to focus on our strategic suppliers where you can get maximum impact, maximum influence, or we're going to focus on suppliers that are contributing to certain contracts. We'll start looking at our commodities. So which procurement categories have we got? Can we really focus on here? And they're a great opportunity for diverse suppliers. And we're going to start defining, our program's objectives. We're going to define what we mean by diverse suppliers, which is really important, and set up those expectations of our suppliers that we're going to activate. The reporting piece is the really important piece. This is a really tricky piece. It can be quite complex, but we need to be really clear on, once we've got those definitions in place, how we're going to collect the information of the tier 2 spend from our tier 1 suppliers. So what sort of pieces of information do we need to collect from them? How frequently we're going to collect that information, any issues around privacy of data collection, and we're going to have to consider both internal and external stakeholders there. And then there's obviously going to be a wraparound compliance piece here. How are we going to deal with contract clauses when we're implementing the supplier diversity program and setting those expectations from our suppliers? And do we want to provide any incentives and recognitions for our suppliers that achieve the objectives that you've set for them around engaging diverse suppliers, whether it's through your enterprise-wide engagement with those suppliers or it's on a contract? I think I'll wrap it there, Anna, and I hope I've made it on time.
Thank you so much, Ben. I think there was so much richness in what you shared, especially around the business case. And it would be great to get into more detail around the program itself. This is a fantastic foundation, and I think that lots of people will have questions around how you set up the different things. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chuck them in the chat, and we will get to them if we can at the end. Otherwise, look, potentially to host another workshop that goes more into the detail of what the program looks like if you're keen on getting one started. So thank you again, Ben. One of the key takeaways that I took from what you were talking about was obviously a Tier 2 program is an important thing for an organisation like yours. One of the things that we get lots is around suppliers thinking that being a Tier 2 supplier is a bad thing. And so you just saying, you know, there are so many other opportunities that come from working with a prime there are lots of different ways in which a supplier can be involved in and work through a client or a prime like yourselves. So thank you again. I'm quickly going to move over to Rachel. Rachel Randall is the Science and Sustainability Manager at Auckland Transport. We've been working with her for the past 3.5 years, 3.5 years, where she's been leading our sustainable procurement function at AT, which is a part of the Auckland Council Group. She's been connecting procurement decision-making with AT sustainability objectives, sitting down on both the procurement leadership team and the sustainability leadership team. She has a focus on driving social and economic equity objectives for Auckland's communities through our procurement projects and services, including supply diversity. Rachel is also a judge on this year's Amotai Supply Diversity Awards and has been an incredible advocate and champion of the Amotai movement. So really excited to be able to introduce you to our very first webinar and have someone as dedicated to the kaupapa as you being a part of the first one with Ben. Hand it over.
Thank you, Anna Jane. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to share a little bit about the practicalities of a Tier 2 programme, building on Ben's excellent presentation there, and really talking through our learnings from through a Aotearoa context. I realised that I've made a mistake with the terminology used on this slide, AT's indirect spend, maximising supply diversity through our indirect spend. What I mean by that is our Tier 2 spend. It's actually spend that is can be directly linked back to our AT contracts. So I must correct that terminology for future communications. Thank you, Ben. If you could move to the next slide, please, Ben. So many of you might know that we've been doing supply diversity at AT alongside Auckland Council for quite some time. For the past 9 years, in fact, since supply diversity was brought over to Aotearoa as a kaupapa. And actually from the very beginning, we've been trialling supply diversity at the Tier 2 level, right from the outset, trialling it in our procurements, particularly in the infrastructure space, and really trying to incentivize through the procurement process our Tier 1 contractors to maximise their spend on our contracts with diverse suppliers. And that we've had lots of successes, but what we sort of lacked at the beginning was, it was more just sort of trialling it out, and what we lacked was that sort of robust systems and processes behind it to really embed it as BAU across our major contracts. So in 2021, we published our first Sustainable Procurement Action Plan. And since then have been trying to embed this and building up those systems and processes to ensure that we're embedding it across many different procurements as a systematic process. We started with our road corridor maintenance contracts, which are very long-term, 10 years plus, large-scale contracts, and worked with those contractors to develop contract-specific KPIs around spend with diverse suppliers. And those KPIs were linked to the overall performance evaluation framework for the contract, and there was an incentive and abatement scheme connected with that. So to do that, we needed to build up our reporting systems, and other such things, which we've been doing over the last few years. And now we're also applying the same systems across many of our other large projects as well. So please move to the next slide, Ben. So the reason we started looking at tier 2 spend in the first place is because we've set ourselves some quite ambitious targets as an organisation for our spend with Pakihi Māori and with diverse suppliers in general. So by 2035, we aim for 10% of our total AT spend to be with Pakihi Māori and 15% to be with diverse suppliers in general, including Pakihi Māori, as well as Pacifica-owned businesses and social enterprises, women-owned businesses and small local businesses. So we spend between 2 to 3 billion every year. So that's quite a lot of money. And we recognise that we can't achieve those numbers through our direct spend only. We have to also look at our tier 2 spend and drive our tier 1 contractors to be ensure that they're on the journey with us as well. So to do this, we have some short-term targets for procurement, which are that 100% of our strategic large-scale procurements have to have Māori spend and supply diversity targets and reporting in place. And we are, as I say, we are also targeting direct spend too. By 2035, we can't actually achieve that target by just our tier 2 spend. So we're looking at both ends of the equation. So this is just an example of the types of deliverables that we expect our contractors to commit to when they are participating in large-scale procurement. So this is an example of a construction contract. And we're trying to communicate really clearly from the outset of the procurement exactly what we want them to be delivering for us in this space, so that they're responding to the RFP with this in mind and detailing their proposed approach to delivering on this. They're also pricing with this in mind. So it's just really clear from the outset what our expectations are around our suppliers' commitment to delivering on supply diversity targets. So we aim to specify the specific percentage spend of the contract that we want to see going to Māori businesses and other diverse suppliers. We tailor this depending on the kind of contract and the size of the contract, because we know that the opportunity, for example, on construction contracts that are very large is potentially larger. So we want to maximize the opportunity. As well as the spend targets, we also are putting in now a requirement that our head contractors partner with one of the emerging suppliers in our new emerging suppliers program, so that they're not only spending with these businesses, but they're also supporting them with that capability uplift piece to support them to grow into businesses which in 5 to 10 years might be at the scale of being able to compete for some of our head contractor work, which is the ultimate aim. And then we're also putting in very clear expectations around reporting. Just important to say that was a construction contract example, but we're doing this across public transport operations, security services, everything basically that we can, where we know that there is going to be a subcontractor component. We recognise that some areas there's more self-performance than others, so we are looking to tailor the targets depending on what the opportunity is. Reporting is super important. Ben touched on this. I just wanted to put in an example of what we're actually asking our suppliers to submit to us. Our reporting system's gone through a few iterations now. It started with quite a complicated SharePoint form, but from feedback from the contractors, we've changed it, gone back to basics, simple Excel spreadsheet, super simple for our contractors to complete and send back to us on a monthly basis. So it's simply asking them to put in their the name of their subcontractors or suppliers that they're using as part of the contract, their NZBN number, so we can easily identify those businesses. We ask them to tag what diversity type the businesses meet their criteria for, and importantly, how they've been verified that they meet those criteria. Obviously, we prefer all Māori and Pacifica businesses to be Amotai verified, so we can have absolute assurance that they do meet our criteria. However, we do accept that in some circumstances, some businesses, for some whatever reason, may not wish to be Amotai registered, and we respect that. So we are also accepting a self-declaration form to be signed by the business owner that they do meet the criteria. And then we're asking the head contractor to just put in what they've spent with that business, that can be directly connected with this contract on a monthly basis. This comes in, saved onto our system, and it feeds through to a Power BI report where we can track how that head contractor is performing against their supplier diversity KPIs, and work with them if they need to be doing more. And it also feeds through to our own AT organisational reporting, so we know how we're tracking on our organisational targets for spend with Māori business and other diverse suppliers. And then just moving along to the next slide. So this is a recent example of a project which had supplier diversity objectives included as part of the procurement, and the head contractor, Dempsey, would completely smash the targets out of the park. They have spent 35% of the entire contract spend with diverse suppliers. So that's a total spend of the contract, not just their subcontract spend. And 27% specifically with Māori and Pacifica businesses. They used 20 different diverse suppliers, and 9 of which were Māori and Pacific, or Māori or Pacifica. So yeah, they just went the extra mile. So it really does show what's possible, and that the targets that we're putting in our contract deliverables that feed through into contract clauses are totally achievable. In fact, they're sort of lower than what's achievable, but we also recognise that different businesses have different business models, some subcontract more than others. So we wanted to acknowledge that in the targets. But yeah, really great example of what is possible. So that's really me. Before I finish though, I'd like to yes, acknowledge obviously Amotai. You know, without them we wouldn't be able to do this. A really important resource and partner to help us and our head contractors understand the source of supply and the opportunity there. But also want to acknowledge Puna Awaro, who are Māori-owned, women-owned supply diversity consultancy, who we've engaged a few times now to support some of our head contractors who need a little bit of coaching in this, and to help them to understand their spend and opportunities, do an analysis alongside them and coach them on their supplier diversity journey, directly linking it back to our AT contracts. So yeah, and again, also really happy to, if there's any time, answer questions now, but please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like any of the tools we've been using, like the reporting spreadsheet. Really happy to share with anyone if you think that would be useful for your organisation as well.
Rach, thank you so much for such a succinct case study for how you actually do this. And I recognise that you would probably say to me, oh, well, we're by no means got this down pat quite yet, but you are most definitely helping to lead in this mahi across Aotearoa. So thank you again. Just a couple of questions, if we could. Amy has asked, do you request invoice numbers or evidence of spend in your Tier 2 reporting?
No, not yet, but it's something that we will be moved towards into the future. We'll be doing auditing with asking for invoices. But no, not yet. We haven't got to that point.
Ka pai. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll collate them. We'll send out an email wrapping up this webinar with the link so that others are able to to share in all the goodness that has come from this kōrero. I know it's 12:59, so I just want to acknowledge you again, Rachel, for coming and being a part of the very first webinar and sharing such a great case study and the work that you've been doing across Auckland Transport, and Ben for sharing the love from across the ditch and knowing that we are working towards the same goals of growing a more equitable world where Indigenous businesses are able to thrive and contribute all of the potential that we have to our communities. I'm going to close in the way that I started. It's always good practice, and to just close the space so that you're able to get on with the rest of your day. He kare kia tātou. Amotai he awai, amotai e kawanga, amotai e whiwhinga, amotai e rawinga. He wake e noa ki te rangi, he moane e noa ki te whenua. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Ka ki te anō, ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Kia ora, ka kite.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ben. Oh, he's gone. Thanks, Missy.